I would like the minimum standard to be much higher. So in the same way that we expect, by default as an expectation in the marketplace, I expect when I buy a carton of milk that it contains milk and it's not half chalk. There was a time where you could sell milk on the market and there wasn't really any regulation or anything to enforce not putting a bunch of chalk in it. There was a time we didn't have seatbelts in cars. That's unacceptable now. Now we have, recalls on food and products all the time. I think privacy should be the same. Privacy and security. We should have marks and standardization. We wrote about all of this stuff in my data submission to the Ontario privacy reform. So, but what I would say is, but a closer dream, because I don't think we're going to get there, is more that it becomes mainstream.
Right.
Using privacy-focused technology becomes the mainstream, and that includes making sure we think about kids as part of this throughout their different stages of development, and that data justice, a sense of data justice and digital justice, is front and center in it. So we're not discovering after the fact that an algorithm doesn't recognize someone because they don't look like half the faces that were put into the feeding and educating of it.
Yeah, I love your point about data justice. We didn't also get into that, but there also seems to be a danger to me of private companies like Apple, which is one of the most virtuous players among big tech, sort of owning the privacy brand under their brand and making it theirs, while regulators and very smart people here, try and get solutions that are really for the general public. So, and in this case, it would mean that if I can afford Apple, I can afford privacy, but if I can't, then it's not something for me. So I think that's
yeah, I don't think privacy should be a privilege, and I think right now it is. I can afford a Mac, and I can afford to pay for my all those VPNs and those tools that I use, and people should be paid for making those tools, absolutely. But the market shouldn't be so poor in that we're subsidizing by giving up so much that's important to us, and then that drives the price down. So virtuous companies trying to do the right thing can't compete.
Right.
I mean, I've been in tech for over 20 years, and I spent over 10 of them at BlackBerry. And I'm in Waterloo, which is Tech Hub Central for, I am so exhausted of the notion of fail fast and move on. And I hate the fact that we are, and you can roll your eyes at me, anyone who wants to, but I hate the fact that we're giving tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars to 20-year-olds who have never actually worked in business for tech ideas that they don't understand. So we are so keen on supporting and rewarding unicorns that come up with cool ideas, and no one's stopping to tell them that, again, privacy has to be first and they need to build a better product or care more about their consumer. Everyone is just always in this mad dash race to make more money faster. Yeah. And again, the regulations aren't coming fast enough, but it would be great, since Hessie's here, for investors to at least be able, if the investors started to say, hey, you know what, this is a great idea, but you've got to put privacy in it before we can move on. That would really, really help. Because I just see too many new ideas that again, people don't have time to put privacy and security into.
So it seems that, there's a big trend towards ESG investing. You've probably heard the term, based on the UN principles. And I think Joe in the conversation mentioned this. Why is ESG investing not yet considering privacy by design in investing? I guess it took them a while to include, climate friendly approaches, and hopefully it won't take as long as 40 years for them to include privacy by design.
Yeah, so I was thinking of a few things. Really, it fits really well with the stuff that I've always enjoyed doing. We need to make people more aware of the privacy risks that they face on a daily basis, and how to manage their own risks. And the businesses that people work for should really encourage employees to learn to protect their privacy, because it helps the business. There's certainly with people working at home now, but there has always been a growing overlap between personal security and privacy, as well as the business. And then from a selfish entrepreneur's point of view, I understand and appreciate, the notions here that, investors have to make sure that, companies or encourage companies to be more privacy focused. I would appreciate, that investors could actually recognize the difficulties and help us get there, whether it's, some kind of milestone based funding or something that could really, encourage us to work that way as well, because there are so many other influences.
Or mentioned earlier, this concept of consented surveillance and surveillance for people as opposed to of people. I would certainly like to see that be the case. And then sort of from our narrow technical perspective, Mark Lazar, who's the partner in Open Consent, and I have been working for a long time around, and Mark and even longer, around something called a consent receipt and a notice and consent receipt. And so, I mean, what I'd like to see is that that's which has now become an international standard, that becomes widespread, and that it actually is a tool that people use to provide interoperability and visibility by providing notices for people and receipts for people about what's actually going on. You never do anything in, only online do you not get a receipt, right? That you give them a receipt for taking your information as opposed to the other way around. I'd very much like to see that dynamic change. And there is funding out there. I mean, I don't know as much from the venture capital community, though they have put a lot of money into privacy, though not sure they know exactly what they're doing with it. But there are things like the Next Generation Internet Project, which is a big EU funding source. We're actually involved in something which is called a Privacy as Expected Gateway that we're building, so that people could. I mean, and for us, that's that's kind of what I'd like to see. I'd like to see that there are no surprises, that when you're online, you have an expectation of privacy, and that's met. As opposed to always having to claw back something that no one was willing to recognize in the first place, and your expectations are not what we're here to consider. So yeah. Privacy as expected and consent receipts to prove it would make me very happy.
That would be wonderful. Yes. It seems like we still all have to, Abigail and Hesse at My Data and Tech for Good Canada and others, and Scott, and as an entrepreneur, have still a lot of education to do.